has always been fueled by passion, pride, and pure emotion, and no one captured that fire quite like Charles Barkley. The man was a walking headline, never afraid to speak his mind or challenge anyone, on or off the court. Love him or hate him, Barkley's opinions always came raw and unfiltered. And when it came to players he didn't like, he didn't hold back one bit. So today, we're breaking down 6 players Charles Barkley absolutely couldn't stand, and the fiery moments, harsh words, and unforgettable clashes that turned professional rivalries into something deeply personal. Bruce Bowen, the defensive pest Charles Barkley could never stand. Bowen built his reputation as one of the most feared defenders of his time, but that legacy came with a shadow. While many praised his lockdown defense, critics couldn't ignore one recurring issue: his habit of sliding under shooters just as they landed. That move sparked outrage, especially from Barkley, who didn't hold back. Bowen wasn't playing defense. Barkley blasted on TNT. He was trying to hurt somebody. For a player like Barkley, who thrived on physical but fair basketball, Bowen's tactics crossed the line. To him, it wasn't clever defense. It was dirty play disguised as hustle, and Chuck didn't stop there. He often joked that Bowen wouldn't have survived a single night in the bruising NBA of the 80s and 90s if he tried that undercut move back in our day. Barkley laughed. Someone would have sent him flying into the second row. Spurs fans saw Bowen as a defensive hero, a key part of San Antonio's championship grit. But to Barkley and many of his peers, Bowen became a symbol of how the modern game sometimes rewards cunning over class. Those controversial fouls might have earned Bowen respect from some, but they also secured him a permanent place on Charles Barkley's all-time least favorite players list, a spot that isn't going anywhere in NBA history. Karl Malone, the rival Charles Barkley could never truly respect. Both men ruled the paint in their prime, redefining what it meant to be a power forward. Their strength, skill, and consistency made them two of the greatest to ever play the position. On the surface, they seemed cut from the same cloth, but personality-wise, they couldn't have been more different. Barkley never hid his feelings. He often joked about Malone's rural lifestyle, the hunting, trucking, and 18-wheeler rides, even calling him a black redneck. While it came off as classic Barkley humor, the joke revealed something deeper. These two legends simply didn't mesh. Me and Karl, we had nothing in common, Barkley told Bleacher Report. Known for his charisma and larger-than-life energy, Chuck couldn't relate to Malone's calm, reserved demeanor. Where Barkley brought laughter and liveliness to every locker room, Malone brought silence and focus. And to Barkley, that just felt dull. Even during their time together on the 1992 Dream Team, the tension was noticeable. Karl was the guy nobody really clicked with, Barkley recalled years later. In a room full of big personalities, he was the odd one out. He didn't vibe with anybody. That didn't mean Barkley ignored Malone's greatness. He repeatedly praised Malone's talent on Inside the NBA, saying, "Karl's one of the best scorers to ever live." But then, in typical Barkley fashion, he added, "Man, he's boring. You watch him play and go, wow, this guy's amazing. Then you talk to him, and it's like watching paint dry." Despite their shared dominance on the court, any off-court friendship was non-existent. Barkley's loud, entertaining spirit clashed hard against Malone's quiet discipline. Their rivalry wasn't just about basketball. It was about personality, pride, and perspective, and even decades later, Barkley makes it clear. He respects Karl Malone's game, but not his vibe. For all his stats, accolades, and history, Malone remains one of Barkley's least favorite legends, a rival he could never quite connect with, no matter how much they had in common between the lines. Dennis Rodman, the rebounding genius Charles Barkley could never bring himself to trust. Few players in NBA history have sparked as much debate and fascination as Dennis the Worm Rodman. His energy, his rebounding brilliance, and his unpredictable personality made him both a fan favorite and a constant headache for opponents. And for Barkley, that chaos was too much to handle. Barkley respected Rodman's game but couldn't stomach the drama that came with it. From wild outfits to trash talk and off-court antics, Rodman was a walking headline. "I didn't trust him, on or off the court," Barkley once admitted during an interview on Sports Illustrated Live. For someone like Barkley, who valued hard work and focus, Rodman's free-spirited nature felt more like a distraction than an edge. The two were wired completely differently. Barkley thrived on structure and competitiveness. Rodman thrived on chaos and unpredictability. Still, even Barkley couldn't deny Rodman's brilliance on the glass. He once called him a mad genius when it came to rebounding, a player who seemed to know exactly where every missed shot would land. But that admiration always came with an eye roll. Dennis could have done everything. Barkley joked on Inside the NBA, but instead, he chose to live in the circus. To Barkley, Rodman was a paradox, one of the most gifted rebounders the game has ever seen, yet impossible to rely on. Respect? Absolutely. Trust? Never. And that uneasy balance of admiration and frustration turned their connection into one of the strangest, most complicated rivalries in NBA history. Bill Laimbeer, the one player Charles Barkley truly couldn't stand. If there was ever an NBA villain tailor-made for Barkley's hatred, it was Laimbeer. As the bruising center of the Detroit Pistons' infamous Bad Boys, Laimbeer embodied everything Barkley despised about dirty basketball. He didn't just play physical, he weaponized it. Bill didn't play dirty, Barkley once said bluntly. He perfected it. To Chuck, Laimbeer wasn't trying to outscore you or outwork you. He was trying to hurt you. That's not basketball, Barkley said. That's a fight disguised as a game. Barkley still remembers the day his patience ran out. After one too many cheap shots, he told Laimbeer to his face, "Touch me again, and we're fighting." And as Barkley later admitted with a laugh on TNT, he meant every word of it. Him. Detroit's bruising, foul-heavy style felt more like pro wrestling than pro basketball. Every time you faced Laimbeer, Barkley joked, it felt like stepping into the ring with Hulk Hogan. And while Laimbeer walked away with 2 championship rings, none of that changed how Barkley saw him. A master of dirty tricks who pushed the boundaries of the game even decades later, Barkley hasn't softened his stance. In his eyes, Bill Laimbeer wasn't just a tough competitor. He was the dirtiest player in NBA history. Charles Oakley, the enforcer who could push even Charles Barkley to his breaking point. Few matchups in NBA history carried as much raw intensity as Barkley versus Oakley. Both were built for battle. Strong, fearless, and always ready to throw down. But if there was one man who could truly get under Barkley's skin, it was Charles Oakley, the league's ultimate enforcer. Oakley didn't just play tough, he lived tough. His mission was simple: make every opposing star uncomfortable by any means necessary. For Barkley, that meant every game against Oakley turned into a test of pride, not just skill. Their clashes weren't just about fouls, they were about dominance. Barkley, who loved to mix it up himself, often mocked Oakley's bruising style, sarcastically calling him the king of cheap shots. The jab didn't sit well. Oakley fired back during a radio interview, saying flatly, "If Barkley keeps talking, I'll slap him like I did back in the day." And that wasn't just talk. The two had a heated run-in during a practice scrimmage years earlier. Tempers flared, elbows flew, and things nearly turned into a full-on fight. For Barkley, going up against Oakley wasn't just tough, it was draining. Oakley hit you first, second, and third, Barkley once said. By the 4th hit, you just wanted to swing back. He wasn't a basketball player, he was a linebacker wearing a jersey. That relentless physical pressure made every game against Oakley feel like survival. And while Barkley would never admit fear, even he couldn't deny it, Charles Oakley was one opponent he truly dreaded facing every single time they met on the hardwood. Playing days ended. It just evolved into playful jabs and lingering tension. Even years after retirement, Barkley couldn't resist taking shots at Oakley's tough guy image. In classic Chuck fashion, he once joked, Oakley loved hitting people. I'm still shocked he didn't end up wearing boxing gloves instead of sneakers. The line got laughs, but it also reminded everyone just how real their rivalry had been. For both men, toughness wasn't just an act, it was their identity. The 1980s and 90s NBA thrived on that kind of physical edge, when every game felt like a battle and respect had to be earned through bruises. Barkley and Oakley embodied that era, raw, fearless, and unfiltered. They didn't back down, they didn't apologize, and they didn't forget. Their clashes weren't just about basketball. They were about pride, power, and proving who could take and give the hardest hit. And even though time has passed, their rivalry still stands as one of the most unforgettable showdowns from the NBA's toughest, most hard-nosed generation. Rick Mahorn, The partner-turned-problem for Charles Barkley. What if Bill Laimbeer was the face of Detroit's bad boys? Rick Mahorn was his muscle. Together, they formed one of the most feared defensive duos in NBA history, a pair that made scoring in the paint feel like surviving a street fight. And for Barkley, who thrived on physical play himself, Mahorn was both a challenge and a headache he'd never forget. Early on, Barkley actually liked Mahorn. They joked around at all-star events and shared a few laughs off the court. But once the game started, that friendliness vanished fast. Rick was great off the court, Barkley said during a TNT segment. On the court, no way. He was just another dirty player. Mahorn's defense wasn't subtle. It was punishment. Barkley often joked that driving into the lane against him felt like walking into a storm. You couldn't take the ball inside without getting hit 5 times, he laughed. By the 6th hit, you started wondering if basketball had turned into football. Their battles were legendary, physical, emotional, and occasionally on the verge of chaos. Barkley once described their matchups as boxing rounds disguised as basketball games. But beneath all the elbows and trash talk, these rivalries represented something deeper, the spirit of the NBA's golden era. A time when pride mattered just as much as points, and players weren't afraid to stand toe-to-toe for every inch of respect. Barkley's feuds with guys like Mahorn, Laimbeer, Oakley, and others weren't just grudges. They were chapters in a tougher, rawer version of basketball history. And for fans who grew up in that era, those clashes remind us what made the game so unforgettable. So now it's your turn. Who do you think was Barkley's toughest rival? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.